My stepmom thinks my relationship with my brother is weird, but hers with her son is way weirder and creepier. I'm genuinely confused about whether I'm missing something or if my stepmom is projecting her own issues onto me and my brother. I'm 23F and my brother Liam is 25. We've always been close. Our mom died when I was 7 and Liam was 9. Our dad did his best raising us alone, but he worked long hours, so Liam kind of stepped into this protective older brother role that went beyond typical sibling stuff. He'd pack my lunches, help with homework, come to school events when dad couldn't make it. We became a tight unit. Even as adults we're close, we text every day, we hang out multiple times a week, we have inside jokes and a shorthand way of communicating that comes from growing up so intertwined. I don't think any of this is weird, it's just how our relationship developed given our circumstances. Dad married my stepmom Patricia 4 years ago when I was 19 and Liam was 21. Patricia has a son named Donovan who's 27. From the beginning Patricia has made comments about how Liam and I are too close, how it's not normal for adult siblings to talk every day, how I should be building my own life separate from my brother. I mostly ignored her because Liam and I weren't doing anything inappropriate. We're siblings who care about each other, that's it. But Patricia's comments have ramped up lately. Last month Liam and I went to a concert together, just the two of us because we both love this band and nobody else we know listens to them. Patricia made a comment about how it looked like we were on a date, that people probably thought we were a couple. I was grossed out and told her that was a weird thing to say. She doubled down and said if I didn't want people getting the wrong idea maybe I shouldn't be so attached to my brother. 2 weeks ago was worse. Liam had been going through a rough breakup and called me upset. I went over to his apartment and we ended up watching movies and talking until like 2 in the morning. I crashed on his couch because I was too tired to drive home. Patricia found out somehow, probably because Dad mentioned it, and confronted me the next time I came over to their house, said it was inappropriate for me to spend the night at Liam's place, that I was too old to be running to my brother every time something happened. I pointed out that Liam had been the one going through something, not me, that I was supporting him. She said that's what girlfriends are for, not sisters. The whole conversation felt off, but I tried to let it go. Then this past weekend everything came to a head. We had a family dinner at Dad and Patricia's place. Liam and I were sitting next to each other and he had his arm around my shoulder at one point while telling a story, just casual sibling affection. Patricia stared at us the entire time with this look of disapproval. After dinner she pulled Dad aside. I overheard her tell him that our relationship made her uncomfortable, that the way Liam and I interacted wasn't normal sibling behavior, that she was worried it was emotionally unhealthy. Dad defended us, said we'd been through a lot losing our mom and we were close because of it, that there was nothing wrong with siblings having a strong bond. Patricia wasn't satisfied. She said Dad was enabling codependent behavior, that Liam and I needed boundaries. I was furious. I confronted Patricia and asked her what specifically she thought was inappropriate about my relationship with my brother. She listed things: we text too much, we hang out too often, we're physically affectionate in ways she finds uncomfortable, Liam is too protective of me, I rely on him too much emotionally. I asked if she'd have the same concerns if Liam were my sister instead of my brother. She hesitated and then said probably yes, but that it was different because we're opposite genders. That's when I snapped. I told Patricia that if she wanted to talk about weird and inappropriate relationships maybe she should examine her own relationship with Donovan before criticizing mine with Liam. She asked what I meant by that. So I laid it out. Patricia and Donovan have a relationship that has made me deeply uncomfortable since I met them. Donovan is 27 and has never lived outside of Patricia's home. He went to college locally and moved back immediately after graduating 5 years ago. He's had the same entry-level job for years and makes decent money but has never mentioned moving out. That alone wouldn't be weird. Plenty of people live with parents longer these days. But it's the way they interact that's unsettling. Patricia still does Donovan's laundry, all of it. I've been at their house when she's folding his underwear and she talks about knowing his preferences for how things should be organized in his drawers. She cooks all his meals. Donovan doesn't cook. Patricia makes his breakfast before work, packs his lunch, and makes dinner. If Donovan wants something specific he texts her during the day and she'll prepare it. She cleans his room. He's 27 years old and his mother is still cleaning his bedroom and changing his sheets. Patricia refers to Donovan as her baby, not in a joking way but constantly and seriously. She'll say things like, "My baby needs this," or "I have to take care of my baby." Donovan calls Patricia multiple times a day, not to chat but to ask her things like what he should wear or whether he should accept a social invitation or what she thinks about various decisions. He doesn't make plans without checking with her first. When Donovan briefly dated someone 2 years ago, Patricia was openly hostile to the girlfriend. She'd make comments about how the girl wasn't good enough for Donovan. She'd call Donovan when he was on dates and act like there was some emergency that needed his attention. The relationship lasted maybe 2 months before the girlfriend apparently couldn't deal with Patricia anymore. Patricia and Donovan have weekly date nights. They call them that, date nights. They get dressed up and go to nice restaurants. Just the two of them. Patricia talks about these outings the way someone would talk about romantic dates. A few months ago I was at their house and saw Patricia cutting Donovan's food at dinner. He's 27. She cut his steak into pieces for him. They also have this weird physical closeness. Donovan will sit directly next to Patricia on the couch even when there's plenty of space elsewhere. She'll run her fingers through his hair while they watch TV. He'll rest his head on her shoulder. When Donovan is sick, Patricia stays home from work to take care of him. She'll spend the whole day bringing him food and medicine and checking on him like he's a child. The bedroom thing is what really gets me though. Donovan's room is decorated exactly how it was when he was in high school. Sports posters, trophies, the same bedding. Patricia says she keeps it that way because Donovan likes consistency. So when Patricia started attacking my relationship with Liam, I pointed all of this out. I told her that Liam and I have a close sibling relationship built on mutual support and shared trauma, that we're both independent adults with our own lives who choose to stay connected. But her relationship with Donovan is something else entirely. She's infantilized her adult son to the point where he can't function without her. She's made herself the primary woman in his life and sabotages any romantic relationship he tries to have. She performs wife-like duties for him and they go on date nights together. I said if anyone's relationship is crossing lines, it's theirs, not mine and Liam's. Patricia's face went bright red. She told me I was being disrespectful and cruel, that she was close with her son and there was nothing wrong with a mother taking care of her child. I said Donovan isn't a child. He's a grown man who she's keeping dependent on her for reasons that seem more about her needs than his well-being. Dad tried to calm everyone down, but Patricia was livid. She said I was jealous that she had a good relationship with her son, that I was projecting my issues onto them. Donovan was there for this entire exchange and didn't say anything, just sat there looking uncomfortable. Patricia demanded I apologize. I refused. I said I wasn't going to apologize for pointing out what everyone was apparently too polite to say. She told me to leave. I did. Liam picked me up and we went back to his place. He'd heard about the fight from Dad and wanted to make sure I was okay. We talked about the whole situation and agreed that Patricia's obsession with criticizing our relationship probably stems from her not recognizing that her own dynamic with Donovan is problematic. But now I'm getting texts from Patricia and Donovan saying I was out of line, that I attacked their relationship unprovoked, that I owe them an apology. Dad is stuck in the middle. He agrees Patricia shouldn't have criticized me and Liam but thinks I went too far going after her parenting and her relationship with Donovan. Some of Dad's relatives who heard about the fight think I was harsh, that even if I disagreed with Patricia I didn't need to tear apart her relationship with her son. Liam thinks I was completely justified, that Patricia has been building to this for years and someone needed to call out her hypocrisy. My best friend thinks I was right but maybe could have been less brutal about it. So I'm genuinely asking, AITA for telling my stepmom her relationship with her son is way weirder than mine with my brother after she kept criticizing us. Update 5 weeks later. I'm updating because the situation has gotten significantly messy and I need outside perspective on where things stand now. After the blow-up at Dad and Patricia's house, I didn't speak to Patricia or Donovan for about 3 weeks. Dad was trying to mediate but I told him I wasn't interested in fake peace, that if Patricia wanted to repair things she needed to acknowledge she'd been out of line criticizing my relationship with Liam. Patricia's position was that I'd attacked her and her son and she deserved an apology before any conversation could happen. We were at an impasse. Then Donovan reached out to me directly, sent me a long text saying he wanted to talk without Patricia knowing, that there were things he needed to say that he couldn't say in front of his mom. I was skeptical but curious. We met for coffee at a place across town where we wouldn't run into anyone from the family. Donovan looked exhausted. He told me that what I'd said at the dinner had been echoing in his head for weeks, that he'd been defensive in the moment because it felt like an attack, but the more he thought about it the more he realized I was right. He said he'd never really examined his relationship with his mom before, that the way they functioned seemed normal to him because it's all he'd ever known, but after I laid it all out he started noticing things that made him uncomfortable. Like how Patricia gets anxious when he makes plans that don't include her, how she needs to know where he is at all times, how she makes decisions for him that he should be making himself. Donovan said he'd tried bringing it up with Patricia, asked her why she still did his laundry when he was capable of doing it himself. She'd gotten upset and said she did it because she loved him and wanted to take care of him, that he was suggesting she was a bad mother by wanting to help. He'd backed down immediately because he hated upsetting her. I asked Donovan if he'd ever considered moving out. He said he'd thought about it but every time he mentioned it Patricia would find reasons why it was a bad idea. The area was too expensive. He should save more money first. Why would he want to leave when everything he needed was at home? Then Patricia would get emotional, cry about how she'd be alone, remind him how much she'd sacrificed raising him as a single mom. He'd feel guilty and drop it. Donovan admitted he didn't know how to untangle himself from this situation, that he felt trapped but also responsible for his mom's happiness. I asked about the girlfriend from 2 years ago. Donovan confirmed that Patricia had sabotaged that relationship. She'd told him the girlfriend was using him, that she'd seen red flags nobody else noticed. She'd create emergencies to interrupt their dates. The girlfriend had eventually told Donovan she couldn't compete with his mother and ended things. Donovan said he'd been angry at his mom for about a week, but she'd smoothed it over, told him the girlfriend clearly wasn't the right person if she couldn't understand how close they were. He'd accepted that explanation at the time, now he was questioning it. I didn't know what to tell him. This was way beyond normal family dysfunction. I suggested he might want to talk to a therapist, someone objective who could help him process the relationship and figure out what healthy boundaries looked like. Donovan said he'd been thinking about therapy, but Patricia had always been dismissive of it, said therapists tried to turn children against their parents, that their family didn't need outside interference. I told him he was 27 and didn't need his mother's permission to see a therapist. He looked like that genuinely hadn't occurred to him. We talked for 2 hours. Donovan asked questions about my relationship with Liam, how we maintained closeness while still being independent people, how we supported each other without being enmeshed. I explained that Liam and I have separate lives, our own apartments, own jobs, own friend groups, own relationships. We choose to be part of each other's lives because we want to be, not because either of us would fall apart without the other. Donovan said that sounded healthy in a way his relationship with Patricia didn't. Before we left, I asked Donovan not to tell Patricia we'd met, that she'd probably see it as me poisoning him against her. He agreed, said he needed time to think about everything without his mom's input. Over the next 2 weeks, Donovan texted me periodically, updates on small steps he was taking. He'd started doing his own laundry. Patricia had been hurt and confused, but he'd insisted. He'd made plans with friends without checking with Patricia first. She'd called him multiple times during the hangout and he'd let most of the calls go to voicemail. He'd researched therapists and scheduled an initial appointment. Each step seemed tiny, but I could tell they were huge for Donovan. Then 10 days ago, everything exploded. Patricia found out Donovan had been meeting with a therapist. I'm not sure how. Maybe she saw the appointment on his calendar or found the bill. Either way, she confronted him. According to Donovan, Patricia completely melted down, accused him of betraying her, demanded to know what he was telling the therapist about their family, said if he had problems with their relationship he should talk to her, not a stranger. Donovan tried to explain that he needed outside help processing some things, that it wasn't about attacking Patricia but about understanding himself better. Patricia wasn't hearing it. She told Donovan that therapists would put ideas in his head, that they'd try to destroy their close relationship, that she was his mother and she knew what was best for him. Donovan stood his ground, said he was continuing therapy whether she liked it or not. That's when Patricia apparently brought me into it, told Donovan that I'd poisoned him against her, that ever since the dinner fight he'd been different and it was my fault, that I was jealous of their relationship and trying to ruin it. Donovan admitted we'd been talking, that I'd helped him see some patterns that concerned him. Patricia lost it, called Dad and demanded he do something about me, said I was manipulating her son and interfering in their family. Dad called me, asked if I'd been meeting with Donovan behind Patricia's back. I said I hadn't gone behind anyone's back, that Donovan had reached out to me as an adult making his own choices, that I'd listened and offered perspective but I wasn't manipulating anyone. Dad sighed, said he believed me but that Patricia was furious and the situation was getting out of control. I asked Dad if he'd ever noticed how unhealthy Patricia's relationship with Donovan was, the enmeshment, the infantilization, the sabotaging of Donovan's relationships. Dad admitted he'd noticed some things that seemed off but hadn't wanted to interfere, that he'd figured it was just Patricia's parenting style and not his place to judge. I told Dad that it went beyond parenting style, that Patricia had created a dynamic where Donovan couldn't function independently, that it was damaging to Donovan even if Patricia couldn't see it. Dad said he'd try to talk to Patricia but doubted she'd listen. 2 days after that conversation, Patricia showed up at my apartment. I didn't even know she knew where I lived, but apparently Dad had given her my address at some point. She was calm when I opened the door, asked if we could talk. I let her in, mostly because I was too surprised to refuse. Patricia sat on my couch and told me she understood why I thought her relationship with Donovan was problematic, that she could see how it might look from the outside. I wasn't expecting that. I waited for the other shoe to drop. Patricia said that Donovan was all she had, that she'd raised him alone from the time he was 3 when his father left, that her entire identity for the past 24 years had been being Donovan's mother. She said when you build your whole life around your child it's hard to know who you are when they don't need you anymore. I asked if she recognized that she'd been keeping Donovan dependent on purpose, to maintain her role as necessary in his life. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. She said she didn't know, that maybe subconsciously yes, that the thought of Donovan not needing her anymore terrified her because then what was she? I felt a flicker of sympathy. This was still messed up but at least Patricia was admitting there was a problem. Then she said that's why she needed me to stop encouraging Donovan to pull away, that she wasn't ready to lose him. The sympathy evaporated. I told Patricia that Donovan establishing boundaries wasn't about her losing him, that he could still have a relationship with her while also being an independent adult. Patricia said it wouldn't be the same, that once Donovan started living his own life he wouldn't need her the way he did now, that their closeness would disappear. I said if their closeness only existed because she'd made Donovan unable to function without her, then it wasn't real closeness, it was dependency. Patricia got defensive again, said I didn't understand because I wasn't a mother, that I couldn't possibly know what it was like to raise a child alone and have that child be your entire world. I said I understood trauma bonding and enmeshment, that just because her intentions came from love didn't mean the outcome was healthy. Patricia stood up, said she'd tried to approach this reasonably but I was determined to destroy her family, that she wanted me to stay away from Donovan. I told her Donovan was an adult who could decide for himself who he spent time with, that she didn't get to control his relationships anymore. She left without another word. That was a week ago. Since then things have been tense across the board. Donovan moved out 3 days ago, found a roommate situation through a friend from work and packed up his stuff while Patricia was out. He left her a note saying he needed space to figure things out and he'd be in touch when he was ready. Patricia has been blowing up Dad's phone, sobbing about how Donovan abandoned her, how this is all my fault, how Dad needs to fix it. Dad has tried talking to her but Patricia won't hear anything that doesn't involve Donovan coming home and me being cut off from the family. Liam thinks this whole thing has validated everything I said about Patricia, that her reaction to Donovan trying to establish independence proves how unhealthy the dynamic was. But I feel guilty. Donovan's life has been turned upside down. Patricia is devastated. Dad is caught in the middle of a nightmare. Part of me wonders if I should have just kept my mouth shut at that original dinner, let Patricia make her comments about me and Liam and not escalated. But another part of me thinks Donovan deserved to have someone point out that his normal wasn't actually normal, that he was entitled to a life separate from his mother. I don't know, the whole thing feels like it spiraled beyond what I intended. Final update, 3 months later. I'm doing a final update because things have reached a resolution of sorts and I want to close the loop on this whole mess. After Donovan moved out, Patricia went through what I can only describe as a complete breakdown. She called in sick to work for 2 weeks straight, stopped answering calls from anyone except Dad, let the house fall into disarray because she'd apparently built her entire routine around caring for Donovan. Dad was seriously worried about her. He tried to get Patricia to see a therapist but she refused, said therapists were the reason Donovan had left in the first place. Meanwhile Donovan was adjusting to living on his own. He texted me updates occasionally, how he'd learned to cook basic meals, how his roommate had taught him to do a proper budget, how strange it felt to make decisions without checking with his mom first. He was still seeing his therapist weekly, said the sessions were hard because he was unpacking years of enmeshed dynamics but also clarifying. About a month after Donovan moved out, Patricia finally agreed to see a therapist, not because she thought she needed it but because Dad gave her an ultimatum, either she talked to a professional about what was happening or he was going to seriously reconsider their marriage. I don't think Dad had been planning to leave Patricia but he was exhausted from being her emotional support system while she spiraled. He needed her to get help. Patricia started therapy. From what Dad shared with me, the early sessions were apparently Patricia insisting the therapist help her get Donovan to move back home. The therapist kept redirecting to Patricia's own patterns and feelings. It took a while but eventually something shifted. Patricia started recognizing that she'd built an unhealthy dynamic with Donovan, that she'd kept him dependent because she was afraid of being alone, that she'd sabotaged his relationships because she saw other women as threats. The therapist apparently used the term emotional incest. Patricia was horrified by the label but couldn't fully deny it applied to aspects of her relationship with Donovan. She'd turned her son into a surrogate partner in every way except physical, the date nights, the need for constant contact, the jealousy of his girlfriends, the enmeshment, all of it pointed to her treating Donovan like he was supposed to fill the role of a romantic partner rather than being her child. Patricia called me about 6 weeks ago, asked if we could meet. I was hesitant but agreed. We met at a park near Dad's house. Patricia looked different, older somehow, or maybe just more worn down. She apologized, said she'd been wrong to criticize my relationship with Liam, that she'd been projecting her own dysfunction onto us because seeing a healthy sibling relationship highlighted how unhealthy her dynamic with Donovan was. She said her therapist had helped her understand that she'd been threatened by me and Liam's closeness because it was genuine and chosen, not coerced through dependency, that we supported each other without needing to control each other. I appreciated the apology, told her I was glad she was getting help. Patricia said she'd written a letter to Donovan apologizing for how she'd raised him, for making him responsible for her emotional well-being, for sabotaging his independence. She'd mailed it but hadn't heard back. She asked if I'd talked to Donovan recently, if I knew how he was doing. I had. Donovan and I had gotten coffee the week before, but I wasn't sure how much to share with Patricia. I told her Donovan was doing well, that he seemed healthier, that he was building a life for himself. Patricia cried, said she was happy he was okay but devastated that she'd damaged him so badly he couldn't even talk to her. I said gently that Donovan might reach out when he was ready, that he needed time to process everything and figure out what kind of relationship he wanted with her going forward. Patricia asked if I thought he'd ever forgive her. I said I didn't know, that forgiveness wasn't something she could demand or earn on a timeline, that it would depend on whether Donovan felt she'd genuinely changed. She nodded, said her therapist had told her the same thing. We talked for a while longer. Patricia asked about my relationship with Liam, how we'd built something healthy after losing our mom. I explained that Liam and I had been lucky in some ways, that Dad had encouraged our closeness but also our independence, that we'd been allowed to grieve together but also to grow into separate people. Patricia said she wished she'd done that with Donovan, let him grow instead of keeping him small. Before we parted, Patricia thanked me, said that even though the confrontation had been painful, it had forced her to examine things she'd been avoiding, that Donovan might have stayed trapped in their dynamic for years if someone hadn't called it out. I told her I hoped she continued therapy, that she figured out who she was outside of being Donovan's mother. She said she was trying. Things with Dad and Patricia have stabilized. They're in couples therapy now, working through the stuff that came up during Patricia's breakdown. Dad says Patricia is genuinely putting an effort to change her patterns. Liam and I are fine. The whole situation actually brought us closer in a weird way. We've talked a lot about how grateful we are that our relationship developed naturally, that neither of us ever weaponized our closeness or used it to avoid building independent lives. Liam's been seeing someone new for the past 2 months. It's going well. I've met her a few times and she seems great. She doesn't feel threatened by Liam's relationship with me, which I appreciate. We've all hung out together and it feels easy and natural. I think part of why Liam's relationships work is because he's never positioned me as competition for his romantic partners. I'm his sister. They're potential life partners, completely different roles that don't overlap or conflict. Patricia apparently never understood that distinction with Donovan, saw every woman he dated as trying to replace her instead of recognizing they served different purposes in his life. As for Donovan, he reached out to Patricia about a month ago. They met for coffee with Donovan's therapist present as a mediator. Donovan told me about it afterward. He said he'd laid out boundaries for what a relationship with Patricia could look like going forward. They could have regular contact, but she needed to respect that he was making his own decisions. No more daily check-ins about what he was wearing or eating. No more trying to manage his social life. No more date nights. Patricia had apparently struggled with the boundaries but agreed to try, said she understood she'd lost the right to expect things to go back to how they were. They've been meeting every 2 weeks since then, always in public, always time-limited. Donovan says it's awkward but Patricia is genuinely trying. She asks about his life without trying to control it. She shares things about her own life that have nothing to do with him. It's progress even if it's uncomfortable. Donovan's also been dating, met someone through a friend and they've been going out for a few weeks. He told Patricia about it during one of their meetings and she managed to say she was happy for him without making it about herself. Small steps but meaningful ones. Donovan told me last week that he's grateful I said something that night at dinner, that he'd probably still be living in Patricia's house doing her laundry and going on date nights if someone hadn't forced him to see how messed up it was. I told him he would have figured it out eventually, that he deserves credit for doing the hard work of untangling himself. He said maybe, but I'd given him permission to question things he'd always accepted as normal. I've been thinking a lot about that, about how sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to pretend dysfunction is normal, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it causes conflict. If I'd stayed quiet to keep the peace, Donovan would still be trapped, Patricia would still be using her son as an emotional substitute for a partner, Dad would still be watching it happen and feeling helpless to intervene. The confrontation was messy and painful, but it cracked open a situation that needed to change. Patricia and I aren't close, I don't think we ever will be, but there's a mutual respect now that didn't exist before. She knows I see her clearly, both her dysfunction and her efforts to change. I know she's genuinely trying even when it's hard. Dad is relieved that everyone is at least talking again. He told me recently that he'd been worried the family would fracture permanently, that he'd have to choose between his wife and his kids. I told him he never would have had to choose, that Liam and I weren't going anywhere, but I'm glad it didn't come to that. Last weekend we had a family dinner, first one since the original blow-up 4 months ago. Me, Liam, Dad, Patricia, and Donovan. It was tentative, everyone overly polite, careful not to trigger anything, but we made it through without incident. Patricia watched Liam and me interact, the casual affection, the inside jokes, the way we'd finish each other's sentences sometimes. I saw her notice it and for the first time she didn't look disapproving or uncomfortable, she just looked sad. After dinner she pulled me aside, said watching Liam and me reminded her of what she'd stolen from Donovan, the chance to have an easy, healthy relationship with a family member. She'd turned something that should have been simple into something complicated and damaging. I didn't know what to say to that. It was true but rubbing it in wouldn't help. I told Patricia that Donovan was building healthy relationships now, that he had time to create the connections she'd prevented him from having. She said she hoped so, that she wanted him to have everything she'd kept from him. Donovan joined us then, asked what we were talking about. Patricia said she was just telling me how glad she was that we were all together. Donovan looked skeptical but didn't push. We rejoined the others. The dinner ended early. Nobody wanted to push their luck by dragging things out, but it was a start. Liam drove me home afterward, asked how I was feeling about everything. I said honestly I was still processing, that 4 months ago I'd been defending my relationship with him against Patricia's criticism and now we were having family dinners where Patricia was in therapy dealing with emotional incest issues with her son. Liam laughed, said when I went off I really went off. I asked if he thought I'd done the right thing, if the fallout had been worth it. Liam said absolutely, that Donovan was free now in a way he hadn't been, that Patricia was getting help she desperately needed, that even though the process was painful, the outcome was better for everyone. He said he was proud of me for not backing down, that it would have been easier to let Patricia's comments go and avoid the confrontation but I'd stood up for us and inadvertently stood up for Donovan too. I told Liam I was grateful we had each other, that our relationship was built on actual love and respect, not need or control. He agreed, said we were lucky. And we are. We lost our mom young and it shaped how we related to each other, but it didn't trap us. We found a way to be close while still being whole separate people. That's what Patricia never understood, that real closeness doesn't require enmeshment, that you can love someone deeply and still let them be autonomous. I think she's starting to learn that now. Whether it's too late with Donovan remains to be seen, but at least she's trying. As for me and Liam, we're exactly the same as we've always been, close, supportive, independent. We talk every day and hang out multiple times a week and go to concerts together and none of it is weird because it's just us being siblings who actually like each other. Patricia doesn't make comments anymore. She's too busy working on herself to worry about my relationship with my brother. And Donovan is figuring out who he is when he's not defined by his mother's needs. The whole situation was a mess, still is in some ways, but at least now everyone's dealing with reality instead of pretending everything was fine. I'll take messy truth over comfortable dysfunction any day. Things aren't perfect. Patricia still struggles with letting Donovan be independent. Donovan still has moments where he defaults to old patterns and has to consciously choose differently. The family dinners are still awkward. But we're moving forward, slowly, imperfectly, but forward. And honestly that's the best outcome I could have hoped for when I snapped at Patricia 4 months ago and told her to examine her own weird relationship before criticizing mine. Sometimes you have to blow things up to rebuild them properly. Sometimes the loving thing to do is tell the truth even when everyone wishes you'd stay quiet. I'm at peace with how I handled it. The fallout was intense but necessary. And at the end of the day, Donovan has a chance at a real life now. That's worth every uncomfortable moment.